I had been running an Airbnb for several years, but eventually decided to stop due to the pressure of balancing it with my full-time job. The main advantage of renting out through Airbnb as opposed to traditional long-term leasing was the potential to earn significantly more money if the property received frequent bookings. Our house was located in a busy vacation area, which made Airbnb a promising option for my wife and me. At first, we were thrilled by the prospects, but as more people booked our place, it quickly became more demanding. We found ourselves needing to keep everything organized, responding promptly to messages, hiring cleaners after each guest's stay, and ensuring the place was ready for the next check-in. It went smoothly for a couple of years until we had a booking that didn't go as expected. We were anticipating a young couple staying at the house, just like countless other times. When they arrived, I sent them the unlock code for the door, as I typically did. I rarely interacted with guests beyond a few messages, just to confirm their arrival and departure and to answer any occasional questions about the house. Once everything was good, I would relax for the rest of the day. But then, just as I was about to get ready for bed around 9 p.m., I received a text from the young man staying at the house. It was brief, saying he was about to call me. I got an uneasy feeling, but I wasn't prepared for what he said. He told me the water wasn't working in the house. Of course, I immediately apologized, though I was puzzled about how that could even happen. Living in a house without water was unacceptable, so I knew I needed to get it fixed right away. I asked if I could come by to inspect it and arrange for someone to fix it the next morning. He was polite and agreed. A few minutes later, I arrived at the house and noticed 2 cars parked in the driveway. This wasn't necessarily alarming, but it was unusual. They had told me they were a young couple just staying for one night, so I didn't understand why they had 2 separate cars. I assumed maybe someone else was visiting them, even though that wasn't allowed under the rental terms. Still, I wasn't overly concerned. I walked up to the door and knocked before entering the code to go inside. The house was eerily quiet. I expected the couple to be waiting for me, but I couldn't find them anywhere. In hindsight, I probably should have searched for them first, but I was tired and just wanted to get it over with. I decided to check the main water valve in the basement to see if there were any signs of a leak or flooding. Everything looked normal. There was no water, no damage, nothing unusual. I was completely confused. I then played with the valve and almost immediately heard the water start rushing again. I turned it a bit more, realizing that it had been completely turned off manually. I stayed in the basement for a moment, trying to make sense of why someone would do that, when a sudden wave of unease began to wash over me. It was unsettling, especially considering I hadn't seen anyone when I walked in. I just couldn't shake the feeling that it had to be the guests who had turned off the water, which meant they might have done it deliberately, either to get me to come over, or possibly to ask for a discount on their stay due to the inconvenience. I decided to leave and grab my car, then call them back to check in. As I made my way toward the stairs, I heard the basement door open and the sound of several sets of footsteps coming down. When they reached the bottom, 3 men appeared in front of me. "Is it fixed?" one of them asked, sounding like the young man I had spoken with earlier, though all these men were clearly much older than the couple I had expected. I told them it should be working now, and that the valve must have just tightened on its own. I didn't want to accuse anyone, as everything about the situation was making me increasingly uncomfortable, and all I wanted was to leave that basement and get away from them. They just stood there, staring at me without saying anything. Took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Well, let me know if you need anything else," I said, maneuvering carefully between them as I made my way to the stairs. They didn't move, still watching me as I passed them, their eyes following me the whole way. As I passed the third guy closest to the stairs, I noticed a gun tucked into the back of his pants. It startled me, and I quickly hurried up the stairs, but they didn't follow. They stayed in the basement as I swiftly exited the house and drove away. Once I got home, I woke my wife and told her everything that had happened. She urged me to call the police to check on them. It didn't seem like the people we thought were staying there, and the whole situation felt off, so calling seemed justified. I think we waited about 20 minutes before receiving a call from an officer. He said that nobody appeared to be home, but he might need me to unlock the door for him. I gave him the code, and about 20 minutes later he called again to say that there were no signs of anyone still being there. The next day, we learned that the card the man used to pay was stolen. After further inspection of the house, it turned out that some expensive decorations and appliances had been taken as well. It became clear that there had never been a young couple staying there. What still didn't make sense to me was their whole plan with the water. I figured they either wanted me to waive the charge for their stay so they could continue using the stolen card, or they had intended to rob me at gunpoint. But then I'm left wondering why they didn't take that step when they had me cornered in the basement. 3 dangerous men blocking my way, leading me into a trap, and yet they just let me go. It's all so confusing. After that incident, I never went back to the house while guests were there. A few months later, we decided to stop using Airbnb altogether and just put the house up for rent. Last year, I took a solo trip to Salt Lake City. I hadn't had many chances to go on vacation before, and when I did, it was always with my family. This was the first time I would get to enjoy a trip by myself. I know it might sound a bit odd, but being alone is fine with me, especially since I never really get the chance to be alone. I researched both hotels and Airbnbs in the area, and to my surprise, the Airbnbs were not only nicer but also more affordable. The cheaper ones, however, were a little farther out from the city. But since I was driving my own car, I didn't mind the extra distance. I chose a nicely sized Airbnb. It wasn't huge, but the kitchen and bedroom were exactly what I cared about. I arrived around 6 a.m. on Sunday. The owner texted me the code, and I unloaded all my things into the place. It was great. Much nicer than the small apartment I shared with my roommate. Once I settled in, I kicked back on the couch, turned on the TV, and relaxed. After a 10-hour drive, I was looking forward to a quiet evening. I fell asleep pretty quickly, but since it was only around 7 p.m., my body woke me up a few hours later. When I glanced at the clock, it was just past 10 p.m., and the TV was still on. I grabbed the remote and turned it off, then got up to grab a glass of water before heading to the bedroom. As I walked from the living room to the kitchen, I felt a strong, cold breeze brush past me. My tired eyes barely adjusted as I looked to my right and saw the front door wide open. My heart raced as I stared at the door. I knew for sure that I had closed and locked it earlier, which made the situation even more unnerving. I walked over and gently closed the door, listening closely for any sounds that might suggest someone was inside. For reference, I'm not the biggest guy, but I'm fairly tall and in shape, so unless an intruder had a gun, I felt confident I could handle myself. I grabbed a kitchen knife, still trying to remain quiet, and proceeded to check every room in the house. Nobody was there. This left me even more confused, so I texted the homeowner asking if anyone was supposed to be coming over that night, or if there was any explanation for what happened. It was late though, so I wasn't expecting an immediate response, so I didn't expect a reply right away. So I went around the house, locking every door, and then checked the place again, now a bit more awake but still really tired. After that, I went to bed and quickly fell asleep without any trouble. However, when I woke up, I was far less calm than before. I heard something from outside. No, not from outside the house, but from right outside my bedroom door. I didn't know what to do and froze, waiting for whoever was out there to make a move. As I lay there, I started wondering how the person could have possibly gotten in. The only one who had the password to the door was the homeowner, so at that moment, I was pretty sure it was him. This thought gave me some courage, thinking it might be some weird guy who likes to spy on the people staying at his Airbnb. I got out of bed, still not hearing anything else, and grabbed my phone from the nightstand to call the cops. But I must have made too much noise because almost immediately, someone started running away from the door heading toward the front of the house. That terrified me even more, knowing that the intruder had been standing right next to the bedroom door this whole time. I dialed 911, but by the time the cops arrived, nothing else happened. The person had already left. I found a hotel to stay in for the rest of my trip, but what's crazy is that the Airbnb owner refunded me. He was able to prove that it wasn't him, and he seemed genuinely concerned. He turned out to be a really nice, older man. It was creepy enough when I thought it was the owner, but realizing it was just some random guy makes it even worse. I still don't know how he got in, or why he was stalking me, but it's still chilling to think about. What really haunts me is waking up and seeing the front door open. Now I know someone was actually in the house. That means whoever it was came in, saw me sleeping on the couch, and did whatever they came to do. It's just incredibly unnerving and creepy. It makes me never want to stay at an Airbnb alone again. Last year, I stayed at a small 2-bedroom Airbnb during a vacation. This place was more of a pit stop on my way to another Airbnb where I'd be staying for the main part of my trip, so it wasn't meant to be a long stay. The place was clean and empty, just as I had expected when I arrived. I walked around the house to check it out before bringing in my luggage and sitting on the couch. By the time I settled in, it was probably around 8 p.m. As I dozed off a little, the sudden ringing of the doorbell startled me awake. I glanced at the front door, feeling confused and alarmed. Being a small young girl, I tend to get scared easily, especially when I'm alone at night and don't like talking to strangers. I got up and walked over to the door, hearing 2 men whispering to each other on the other side. The door didn't have a safety lock or anything, so I kept it shut and called out to them. "Hello?" One of the men responded, "Hey, we're here for the Airbnb. Can you open the door?" I called back, asking what they meant by being here for the Airbnb, not understanding their request. He then said that he had the place booked for the night. I knew there had to be a mistake, so I yelled through the door that I had it booked, too, and that he needed to contact the owner. The man didn't sound happy about that, although I could understand why. If I were in his position, I'd be upset too. I heard one set of footsteps move away from the door, while the other man asked again if I could open the door so we could talk about it. I was about to give in, my hand hovering over the doorknob, thinking he seemed believable. Something told me to just play it safe, so I quickly said that my husband would be down in a few minutes to figure things out. I didn't want them to know I was alone, hoping that would throw them off guard if something bad was going on. There was no response from the man, and I waited another minute, not hearing any footsteps leaving. Then, I moved the short curtain aside and peeked through the small window. The man I had been talking to was facing his car, parked in the driveway, but beyond him, something terrifying caught my eye. A group of maybe 5 people stood further down the driveway, partially hidden, as though waiting for a signal. They were all wearing some kind of face coverings, and I couldn't see the other side of the door, but I assumed there were even more people there. Given the area I was staying in, I immediately suspected this was likely a gang, and the fear hit me hard. I backed away from the door, panicked, trying not to hyperventilate. I rushed to the bedroom to grab my phone and dialed the police, hearing footsteps moving all around the house. It felt like I was surrounded by a pack of wolves, and at any moment they could smash the windows and break in. I took my phone into the bathroom with me and called 911, trying to stay as calm as possible. The operator told me to stay quiet and calm, reassuring me that a team was on the way and would be there in a few minutes. I stayed on the line, still hearing footsteps around the house, until the horrible sound of wood bending and snapping came from the front door. By this point, I was crying uncontrollably, trying to muffle my sobs with my hand. I listened as the group of people stormed inside, opening doors and cabinets, and then one of them approached the bathroom door, trying the handle. He yelled, then walked away, and the group continued looting the house. Soon after, I heard the distant sound of sirens, and they started to scatter. By the time the police arrived, they had all left, but everything I owned was gone. My car had its window shattered, and it had been looted too. One of the officers sat with me to get some details and explained that there had been a recent rise in break-ins by large groups or gangs. They didn't think their goal was to harm the residents, just to rob them of everything, which is probably why they left me alone in the bathroom. They knew I wasn't a threat, even though their intentions didn't seem to involve hurting me. It was still horrifying. I know it probably had little to do with me staying at the Airbnb that night, but it's left me incredibly anxious every time I book one now. That was another true story, but in the world of horror, truth is often stranger than fiction. If you're still watching, you're one of the brave ones. Most don't make it this far. Before you go, check behind you. Not everything that follows you makes a sound. Subscribe to Horror Stories and hit the bell because the next horror stories drop soon. And remember, the scariest stories are the ones that actually happened. Stay scared. Stay safe. We'll see you in the dark.